All right, you guys, we're thanks for joining us. I've asked my good friend, the Darkwater Hermit, my favorite gnome in the world, and Santa Claus to come join me on this conversation. Fred,
Yes,
thank you
it's
so
getting
much.
more names by the day.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thanks for joining and having this conversation. We're just going to talk a little bit about your book today. Um, and we could probably spend hours talking on your about your book, and we could probably film more episodes on it. But like, will you just start? Just jump in. Like, give us a synopsis of your book. I mean, the introduction itself is fascinating. So, I have some follow up questions, but if you could just give us like a little synopsis on your
Yeah,
book
but
and
I think it's got like a 40-page preface. I learned that from my philosophy buddies. Um,
yeah,
all my favorite philosopher books had these huge prefaces because
right,
philosophers are definition junkies, and
right,
you have to define your terms or you can end up
hmm
talking past people. So
right,
I basically spent 40 pages showing people my worldview, where I'm coming from, what my presuppositions are,
yep.
and then I engage with the topic of ethics.
and you
But in
and
order
you
to have a conversation about ethics, I mean,
yeah,
first to define ethics, it's the theory of right conduct.
right,
How should we live? And morals would be like application of your ethic. So a
hmm
moral person is someone who adheres to their ethic. An immoral person is someone who doesn't live up to their ethic. But
okay,
that's not normally how we use the word immoral. Usually, if we call someone immoral, we're saying you're not living up to
to
my.
my ethic. Yes,
They
exactly.
may be perfectly moral within their own ethical framework.
Right.
So that's the first thing I have to explain is the power of presuppositions and worldviews, and
Yes.
how your worldview is going to affect your views on right and wrong, good
Right.
and evil, or you may not even believe in such things.
Right. Now, part of why I wanted to have this conversation is my focus on identity and the self, which is exactly that. Like your perspective, your upbringing, your experiences, the way that you see yourself and the world, and you moving in it really impacts your behavior. It impacts your actions, and so that's
Yes.
when we get to the we'll get into that. That's the
Well,
connection
that
for me.
is part of the preface is first we try to define what a human being is
Okay.
because we're talking about human ethics. I mean,
Right.
I'd love to write a book on tree ethics someday or dog ethics or bird ethics, but
Mm.
this book's about human ethics.
Yep.
And
Okay.
so we have to define what a human is, which is
Okay.
no easy task. And and I don't think I did it. It's more I want people to see the difficulty of even defining what a human being is and how
Okay.
worldview plays into that. And then because it is a kind of a Bible based or Christian based ethic, I have to define what a Christian is. And as you can imagine, that's quite something. And um, then that gets us to the book's kind of has three major parts after the preface. So it's a four-part book. The preface takes up about a fourth of it. Then I get into ethical theories, and
Okay.
that's kind of my showing
All
off
of them. Yeah.
my philosopher scholastic
Yeah.
expertise to
Yes.
let people know I know what the other theories are, how they work, what the strengths and weaknesses are. So I go through and as objectively as possible describe each of the major ethical theories in the West, and I do about nine of them.
Okay.
Then I go back through and I critique them and show their shortcomings and why they fail as ethical theories.
Okay.
So that ends section one, basically with us left with no ethical theories that are working. And
Okay.
then I pivot to the third part of the book, which is more mystical and experiential. And it's kind of my personal journey and how coming out of like a fundamentalist Baptist subculture
Yeah.
and then getting out and seeing good parts of the world and meeting incredibly diverse people and
Right.
how that affected my perspective.
Yeah.
And um, but it's also the section where I encounter Jesus personally and how that changes
Mm,
everything. And
yes.
so then it becomes more of a almost non-ethic or anti-ethic,
Right.
because ethics is really about self effort and self improvement, kind of like
Hmm.
religion or
Hmm.
philosophy.
Hmm.
And the more I began to understand what I believe the gospel is, where our self efforts or improvements will never reconcile us to God, but that
Right.
is done through the person and work of
The work
Christ.
of Jesus. Yes.
And so,
Well, and eventually the Jesus in Fred.
right. And so I understood that as it pertained to salvation, this
Yes.
idea that there's nothing we could do to save ourselves. But somehow I got confused along the way, and thought, okay, I'm saved by the person and work of Jesus to be reconciled to God. But then there's this other part called sanctification, which is living a set aside and holy or perfect life.
Right.
And somehow in my twisted head, I got the idea that Jesus saved me. Now it's up to me to live this perfect, set aside, holy
S-
life,
Yeah.
which I'm not really good at.
Right. But then also you were living in a context that said that this is the way that you should do it. Right?
Well, right,
Follow
and
follow
it's
these rules, be
it's
like
very
this.
mixed messaging, right?
Right.
It's you're living in a system that talks about saved by grace through faith, and yet they have more rules than anyone you can
Works.
imagine. And it's just like, well, what's that all about? And so, anyways, when I finally came to terms with I can no more sanctify myself than I could save myself, that's when things began to change. And I
Okay.
realized I'm perfected the same way I'm saved through the person and work of Christ.
Yeah.
My job, if there's a part Fred has to do, is basically to get out of the way. It's
Yeah.
it's my little acronym for my ethics. I call it ethics in the raw. R is for reckon yourself dead but alive to Christ.
Right.
A is for abide in the
In
vine,
Christ.
which is Christ,
Yeah.
and you will bear much fruit. And W is walk in the spirit, and you will not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So
Yeah.
that's my little acronym in my head: ethics in the raw, reckon, abide, walk. And then if we do have any labor, we are to labor to enter into his rest. And
Mm,
it's Christ's rest because he did the work, not
right.
us.
Right.
So our the way I'm interpreting that is, and why the book is called The Dead Have No Need of Ethics, is because my labor is to stop laboring,
Right.
which is crazy.
It's so
So that's my
counterintuitive.
constant mantra is, Fred, what are you doing? Why are
Right.
you trying to redo what's already been done?
Right.
So
And
that's the dead have no need of ethics in a nutshell.
no,
And
and I
then the next part, I do some applications.
okay.
I do like 5 ethical dilemmas and kind of show how I would go through the process personally.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing to me is, and this might be part of an existential element to my non-ethic, is you could be coming from the same worldview background, believe the same thing about scriptures or Jesus or the Holy Spirit, and you might actually be led to do something different than me.
Right.
And they both could be correct moral things,
Right.
which is
That
wild.
which is, well, but then God, that's the way that God made us. And that's the work of figuring out self. Well, we've had this conversation as well. But getting to know yourself and like figuring out, like, you know, sifting through your experiences and your personality and all of that. And but I love that counterintuitive, like getting out of the way and entering into the rest. Like it just seems so counterintuitive, but it's also the hardest work. It's hard work to get out of the way. Can you just talk a
Oh,
little
we
bit
like to
about that?
participate because we like to get praise and credit and feel a sense of accomplishment, but
But
it's not
but
about that.
but when you were talking about that, it reminds me of Psalm 23, where it says, "He leads me beside the still waters," right? So
Yeah,
if there's any work, you go to the still waters, and then He restores your soul. Like, but we want to do the restoring of our soul, like, because that just
yeah.
you
Good
know
luck.
is way more fun. Or you get better accolades if you can restore your soul, but like the actual work is to actually walk beside still waters and let Him do that work. I mean, man, I love it. I love how counterintuitive it is. Now, why is it so hard for us to understand this?
I think ego,
Mm.
and I don't want to call the ego a false self, but it's just, if you remember back to my lotus petal
Lotus, yeah,
analogy,
yeah,
I would see it as just different iterations, manifestations, but it's not who we really are in our core.
yeah.
And but that's a tough one.
All
Um,
right, keep going, man. Sorry.
well, when we talk about that, was part of my biggest struggle was um, this understanding of the self. And I've done a lot of philosophic and psychological work and biblical work on the what is a human being, what is a self.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, I had double deaths within a month of each other of two significant people in my life. That was probably about
Hmm.
7 years ago now. Wow. And both my dad and one of my best friends and traveling companions died within a couple months of each other. And it was weird to see how much of my perception of self was entangled in these two other men
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
relationships I had. And when they were physically gone, there was kind of like this unraveling, and I had to do this a lot of repair work because I was like bleeding out of these lost relationships. And that made me kind of revisit who I am again.
Wait, is it because so much of yourself you found
It
in
was
them?
entangled.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Okay.
And
But what's the bleeding out part? What was bleeding out?
well, it's kind of just imagine your heart like roots grown into other hearts,
Entangled. Yeah.
and you're all feeding and nurturing and relating to each other. And then when that one heart dies off and you no longer have that connections or interchange or resources, that's that's the part you have to heal, those
Hmm.
broken connections. And
Yeah.
people don't have to die for that, right? That could happen through divorce or alienation or
Right.
loss of friendships or all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But anyways, it kind of made me revisit the whole self thing. And that's when I was talking to you about, I liken the self to the human eye, that
Yeah.
we
Where
use
you can't.
ourselves to perceive everything else, but we can't get out of ourselves to perceive ourselves.
Right.
Because wherever we go, our self is perceiving.
Hmm.
And so I think the best we can get is reflections of the self by people in our lives, and that could be friends or enemies.
Right.
There,
I love
some
that
people
distinction.
reflect back similarities, and other
Hmm.
people reflect back opposites of
Yeah.
who we are. And I think that's so interesting.
Yeah.
But I think God only knows our true self. We talked about the
Right.
Joe window
Yeah.
and those parts of ourselves we can't perceive.
Yeah. That
And
stay hidden.
but I think it's still, I don't think until ourself is revealed to us by God, we're going to fully know ourselves. But I still think it's work to do.
Right.
Um, well, it's my job. I'm a philosopher.
Right.
It's what I like to spend my time thinking about.
Wait, would peeling back the lotus petals be a part of getting out of the way?
I think so. It's kind of like
Yeah.
that recognition, and it's very similar to Buddhism, to or Taoist principles, where you become an observer of the self,
Hmm.
and you're watching your thoughts float by like clouds in the sky or swimming by like fish in a stream, and you acknowledge them, you observe them, but you don't engage them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you don't identify with them. But
Yeah.
that still begs the question: who's the one observing the self?
Right.
I mean, who's that self?
Mm.
That's the
Yeah.
self I want to know.
Right. But like you said, that will be revealed to us one day. Like it's
And
not
in
in this
Buddhism, of
lifetime.
course, that's the big self, right? The universe am I self.
Yeah.
And Hinduism, that would be their like Brahman within, Atman, Brahman within. But in
Hmm.
Christianity, um, we're talked about Christ dwelling in us, right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
being knit together with the Holy Spirit, and the Scripture talks about two selves, right? We have that old man in Adam and the new man
Hmm.
in Christ, and so
Hmm.
we have that weird dichotomy.
Hmm.
But the old self's supposed to be dead, and
Right.
and so that's part of the reckoning part. Reckon
Right.
yourselves dead,
Yeah.
but alive in Christ. So we don't stay dead, but we're living a resurrected life now.
Right. But we are, there's the dead self. That's a part of who we, that's who we are.
Yeah, it's to me it's like zombie land when I forget who I am and I'm running around in my old dead Fred self and doing dead Fred things.
Dead Fred.
And then you
So
wake up and come to your senses again and you're repulsed by all the stuff you've been doing and you're
mhm,
like disassociating, right? You're like, that's not who I
it's
want to
not.
be. That's not who I want to be a part of. I want to be this self. I want to be in.
But that is what a lot of people live into. They live into their dead selves,
Mm.
right? This is and they try to keep that dead self alive by doing and being and achieving and
Right. The dead self's trying to do the workout and it
it's
can't. It just needs to be dead.
yeah, yeah. And so then the alive in Jesus part, can you explain that?
Yeah, that's kind of like we can use the grafting analogy. When you cut off a branch from a tree, you've cut it off from its life, its source, its nutrients. And if you're
Right.
not grafted into Christ, if you're just this cut off branch
Right.
trying to produce stuff, you're just going to wither and die. And so that John 15
Yeah,
metaphor
passage. Yeah.
of us being grafted into Christ and all that vitality is flowing through us. It's
Mm-hmm.
not from us,
Mm-mm.
but we get to participate almost like conduits of the divine. And
Mm,
that's how I
and
see myself running around as a when I'm in the spirit, I'm like a conduit of the divine. And
mm,
that could be when I'm downtown, driving on the freeway, or walking in the woods or doing a podcast.
mm-hmm.
You can
It's
be a conduit.
so I see Jesus in you,
Good.
you know? And you live that, so like the almost getting out of the way allows me to see the Jesus Fred and interact with the Jesus Fred,
Right.
which in turn is another way of actor interacting with
And some of us have a
God.
lot more to get out of the way from than others. And it's tough when you have a big ego.
Yeah.
And but God's really good at helping people with their egos
Yeah, but that's the dying to the self passage
daily,
daily, daily.
daily.
And if we're not doing that, if we don't actually have a daily practice of, all right, I'm going to die to myself, and then for me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Like that, like it's in the scriptures. It's like we all know these verses, but like to actually do it, why don't we get that? Why don't we teach it?
Uh, I think there's a few reasons. I think one is fear because
Mm,
it's so much freedom.
yeah.
Because it's really not about rules or ethics or hoop jumping anymore. It's about abiding
Mm-hmm.
in God, and I love the passage that I think it's in Matthew about when Nicodemus comes to see Jesus, and Jesus is trying to explain to him. He says, "The wind bloweth where it willeth,"
Mm-hmm.
and you can hear you can hear the sound of it, but you don't know where it's coming from or where it's going. And
Mm-hmm.
so is everyone that is born of the Spirit.
Mm,
And it's just this wild, you never know what the spirit is gonna have you do
Yeah.
on any particular day or moment.
Yeah.
But when it's no longer the limb show or the Fred show, but
Yeah.
it's the spirit show,
Yeah.
I mean, the possibilities are profound.
That's amazing. All right, can we continue on? I'm sorry, I just keep interjecting.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about?
um, like I have to think through the concepts. How? Okay. Oh man. Oh man. I, how do I walk? How do I walk someone through this? I mean, I want to do it for myself as well, so I'm in process. But like,
Yeah,
and
I'm
and
almost
and and,
wondering if I
and,
need
and
some.
you are like against the formula. You know what I mean? You are not like, here's the formula. If that's I totally understand that, and I'm asking like, all right, what's the
Yeah, we're not
formula,
baking
Fred?
cookies.
Because everyone's different.
Everyone's different.
And so for and the ethical theories is you get to choose your ethic.
No, no, you're the dead don't need any ethics.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But I'm talking about the ethical theories,
Oh yeah, well, most people are enculturated into a particular ethical theory by their parents or their country or their education
whether
system.
they know it or not.
Right.
Yeah,
And as
whether they're
most
aware of it or not.
Americans are like a hybrid of egoist and utilitarians.
Mm.
And we also have a lot of divine command theorists in the country that believe God's will is good, God prohibitions are evil, which I have no problem with that in theory. It's where my problem comes in is
When you superimpose that onto me,
right when you're claiming to know God's will for my life and
yeah,
trying to enforce it on me, that's when I have a problem.
yeah,
I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had people come up to me at church or afterwards at the potluck or something and pull me aside and say, brother, I have a word from the Lord for you. And, and I'm just like, well, that's curious because he has my number.
right, right,
And usually those words in the Lord, from the Lord weren't from the Lord. They were from that person's
right.
desire to control or change me based
Mm,
on their perceived understanding.
oh man,
And we all have the capacity for self-deception,
yes,
right? And so so that's the thing. I mean, I guess that's where it would be good to have other people in your life that can hold up a mirror and say, "Hey, have you checked yourself out lately?"
hmm.
Or that sort of things. But that takes a lot, right, to be able to speak into someone's life at that level.
Well, but yeah, something that you highlight is the community. Like you said, your friends and your enemies really reveal something to you
Even
about.
enemies.
Right. Yeah, I love that distinction. But like, so then we need that community. We need interactions with enemies. We need interactions with friends in order to learn about self. Like I that's a big piece. It's interesting. It's a big piece of trying to figure out yourself, like the community piece.
Right. I mean, I want to just identify as Jesus, but I'm not Jesus.
Yes.
I'm knit together with Jesus. I'm a new creation through the power of the Holy Spirit. Um, that's restoring my mind, my nous,
Yes.
which I believe is that highest part of our human psyche.
Yeah.
Um, but it's in restorative process. I still feel my intellect is broken, my emotions are broken, my nous is broken. But
Even
I,
still.
right, but I think there's a mending taking place.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And the peeling back of those layers of those leaves
And that's part of we talked when we talked last time. I mentioned trying to be patient with
with
ourselves
yourself. Yeah.
as we're being transformed. I mean, I'm crazy patient with other people,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing I need to give myself that same grace. Also, a weird thing resonated with me. I probably about 10 years ago now. I came across this idea that God didn't just love me, but He liked me,
Oh.
and I don't know why that actually meant more to me than Him loving me, because love was just such this abstract, all-encompassing. Well, of course, God is love; He has to love, but liking me seemed more like a unique personal choice. Like there was something about this particular creation that he really liked, and he
Mm-hmm.
liked to hang out with me,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of was vying for my attention and my affection, and I love that.
Mm.
And that's how I interact with God. It's we're in this ongoing relationship, and
Oh.
we we I just love hanging out with him.
And he loves, well, and you're able then to see him, man, in everything.
I think he trips out on how much I appreciate him and his stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've been with you in the forest.
It's
Like
weird.
honestly, like you talk about it so much, and I see you give lectures on it, but to actually walk with you in the forest, and to just get a glimpse of how you interact with God in the forest. Like we were hugging trees, we were smelling them, you know what I mean? And we were just like, oh, like you can really smell whatever it is that you were pointing out. We were looking at flowers. I remember one time we were walking at the old campus, and you had just come from a lecture, you had your books and your mug, and I saw you were smiling at like a bush. You
I
know what I
knew all the
mean?
trees on that campus.
And I walked up to you. I'm like, you're considering the lilies, aren't you? I mean, there really weren't lilies there, but the principle of considering the lilies of the field, and you just had the biggest smile on your face, and it was an interaction with God that you were having. Like, and you were just walking back to your office from the class, and I was like, man, this guy is doing it all the time, you know? Oh my gosh, I love it.
I went on a walk yesterday, and I really wanted to stretch my legs after being holed up for a week recovering.
Hmm.
And so it was like a 6 mile hike. It was like 3 miles out and 3 miles back along
Hmm.
Elk River. And when I got to the 3 mile point, I was just sitting on the bridge, just watching the river flow by. And I kid you not, this butterfly just flew up the river, and it saw me, and it just came straight to me and landed on my elbow and just hung out with me.
Oh.
Of like all the places it could have landed, it wanted to hang out with me, and we just hung out, watching the river flow by, enjoying the day.
Mm.
And I just love those little random interactions.
And you experience something like, I mean, you know what I mean, you experience God in those moments.
Oh yes,
I mean, and I say that like, like as an academic, I'm not like, I get my experience, you know what I mean, but like the way that you experience is, especially out in nature, is just like a whole nother level. And like again, you know
and
I
it's
didn't.
growing.
Oh
I
my
thought I
gosh,
loved it before, but now where I live, I don't know. It's really been wonderful.
man.
I
the
like to
head
tell people I'm living in the foyer of heaven.
Yeah, the heavens definitely declare the glory of God.
But even then, as happy as I am and how much transformation's taking place in my life, this version of Fred you're talking to right now in heaven would make heaven not heaven anymore,
Mm.
because there's still like all this dust and ash that needs to be shed.
And lotus petals.
And but it's okay, because it's one of
Right.
those things, it's already been accomplished. It helps keep me humble to
Mm-hmm.
see the level of my brokenness still, but
Okay.
that hope of
Yeah.
that transformation, that in God's economy has already taken place, and I'm getting to live through the process.
I love it.
And
I love
so
it.
it's a weird time perspective trip
No. And
and perspective.
yeah, the more we talk about it, the easier it is to understand, you
Oh,
know.
good.
But but here, you know what I mean? Like to understand it here and to understand it here, I'm working on that.
Well,
but
I
I like
think
but I
the
like that we're
more
in
you feel,
process.
the more you feel yourself being used as like a conduit,
Hmm.
uh, I think it helps. And usually, when I've experienced those the most, have been the most stressful, difficult times where I was so over my head, I had to just surrender and say, I can't.
Right.
And then Jesus is like, finally, move
Yeah, I'll
over.
do I'll do it through you.
I got it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're going, what? And
Yeah.
you're just seeing the flow pass through you. And it's not coming from you, but it's passing through you. And I notice other people are attracted to it and they can sense it and feel it.
Right.
It's God emanating out into the universe through you.
Hmm.
And oh, but one of the most profound times that ever happened was when I was traveling with my buddy Carl,
Hmm.
and he loved the tropics, but he got
Yeah.
norovirus or something on one of our trips.
Oh,
And
okay.
the crew was really worried that they were going to have to life flight him with a helicopter or something off the ship, which
Oh
is kind of
shoot.
dangerous. And so when we got to our next port,
For
it
those
was
of you that don't know Carl,
uh,
he was in a wheelchair. It's not
it
like
was
he could
my
walk.
quadriplegic buddy, but very
He was,
accomplished,
yeah.
and he truly lived a Christ filled life. His attitude
Yeah.
and peace and joy were, people were drawn
Off the
to this
charts.
broken
Yeah.
body of a man because of what was happening inside him. Anyways,
Yeah.
poor guy. It's, I've never seen him that bad. Uh, one night with this virus, he was laying in bed, and it was like an alien was running around under his belly, and he was just like begging God to take him and asking forgiveness for any thing he may or may have not done, and just please mercy. And I'm just going, oh my God. So I basically just spent the night with a hand on his belly trying to calm that alien running around in there, and one on his brow, and I just kind of cradled him through the night. And then the next day they disembarked us on this island in the Caribbean. They're like, oh, it's got a modern hospital and all of that. And it was an open air hospital. And this was when the Zika virus was going on. And remember, my friend's a
Jeez.
quadriplegic. He can't even swat stuff
Right.
away from his face.
Yeah.
And we walk into this open air hospital, and I mean, people got chickens in there, and
Wait,
families are
they
hanging out.
stopped the whole tour just to let
No,
you guys
one
off?
of the scheduled tours,
Oh, oh,
but they
okay, okay,
disembarked us. They weren't
okay.
going to let us
Like
continue.
you're not coming back. Yeah.
And we're like 3,000 miles from Miami out in the Caribbean on St. Martin. Anyways, I, I just, it was so beyond anything I could control or help. I just got into this conduit mode, and everything just started flowing. And he was
Mm.
getting the treatment he needed. We were able to get a life flight. They sent us a Lear jet with two nurses
Oh, jeez.
to pick him up on the island. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, I never traveled in a private jet before. It was fantastic. But I, because of the weight issues, we couldn't bring any of our stuff. So we had to leave behind his wheelchair, all his
Oh,
luggage, medical equipment. We basically could take a day pack each. That was it.
yeah.
And but there was so much peace and calm, and we were able to get the cruise ship disembarked one of their employees just to kind of help us
Oh,
make
wow.
our connections. And I remembered she had to meet the cruise ship back in Miami as well. And I had her number and I called her, and she brought all of our stuff with her
No
on the
way.
plane. The wheelchair, she had like a train going of all our gear. And I met her in Miami. And I don't know how many times I went back and forth between Fort Lauderdale and Miami, shuttling Carl's stuff, getting his chair,
Yeah.
getting his equipment. But we actually made our flight back on time,
Oh
to San
wow.
Diego. But that whole time, I I felt like I was outside of myself just watching.
And the
Yes, and it was so weird. It was just like
I
um,
like the
um,
word animate. Like it's like the
it was just like I was
you're
filled with
animated by the spirit.
heavenly light. I was like glowing, even though it was this profoundly stressful
Mm-hmm.
situation. But because my ego was checked out, and
Mm-hmm.
I was just in this pure service mode of taking care of my friend, I
Yeah.
had just kind of given over my will, my desires, all of that, and to be part of this flow. And but when it was over, this lasted for probably 3 days of that hyper flow
Mm-hmm.
state.
Mm-hmm.
When it was over, I just felt like I had been scoured,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I might have slept a week. I mean, I can't imagine living in that state all the time,
Right.
but I think that was the state Jesus lived in.
Right.
And I was
No.
just thinking, oh, holy
All the time. Well, and that's why rest is so important.
oh, he did a lot of rest too.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's such
He
a great.
definitely understood ebb and flow,
Yeah.
solitude, and community.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope we all get to experience that at least once. But you know, like I love that the idea is that we need to get out of the way in order for Jesus to like animate us in that way and flow through us. I love it. Well, thank you, my friend, for meeting and talking. And I love you so much, and I love your ideas, and I love how you
Love you
challenge
too,
me.
Lim. I'm so glad we're still connected
Yeah.
after all these years.
And I have already talked to a couple of folks that are really excited to hear this. So, some former students and some that like, they didn't even go to San Diego Christian, but they're really interested
Good,
in hearing
good.
about this. I know of at least one person that has bought your book
Yay.
because of the last time we chatted. And so for those of you that are interested, you could grab Fred's book on Amazon. You can find it,
Yeah,
and
there is a paperback version, but the Kindle version is nice because it's got hyperlinks that goes to my YouTube channel lectures, so you can
oh
actually
yeah,
hear me. I mean, they're in the book, but you'd have to manually type them in yourself. But the Kindle, you just click the link and you're
and it
boom
goes
right
right to
right
your
in my
channel.
classroom and discussing what I just wrote about in
Yeah.
probably a lot more detail.
Well, I love it. Well, thank you so much, my friend. We'll have to do this again later.
All right, thanks, Lynn.
All right, take care. And just if you could just let it upload, it says 99%. You have a oh there, it's done.
That was quick.
So what I'll do is I'll edit it and then I'm gonna share a link with you and then you could download it and you could upload it or do whatever you want to it. But